On one side, we have value types, also called primitives. On the other side, we have reference types. So in the value types category, we have number, string, boolean, symbol, which is new in ES6. We're going to look at that later in the course, as well as undefined and null. These are the primitive or value types. On the other side, we have objects, functions, and arrays. So in the last lecture, you learned that functions are also objects. The same is true about arrays. So in a nutshell, in JavaScript, we have primitives and objects. Now in this lecture, I'm going to show you how primitives and objects behave differently, because this is absolutely important for you to understand before we move on to the next section where I talk about prototypes. So on this empty canvas, I'm going to define two primitives, x and y. I'm going to set y to x. So here y is 10. Now I'm going to change the value of x to 20. What I want you to note here is that x and y are two independent variables. So let's save the changes, go back in the console. Let's log x is 20, and y is 10. They are independent. So when we work with primitives, this value that we have here is stored inside of this variable. When we copy that variable, that value that is stored in the variable is copied into this new variable. So they are completely independent of each other. Now let's see what happens if we use a reference type or an object here. So I'm going to change this to an object that has a property called value. And then instead of setting x to 20, I'm going to set x.value to 20. So save the changes. Back in the console, let's log x. So you can see value property is 20. Now let's log y. You can see the value property of y is also 20. So this is the takeaway. When we use an object, that object is not stored in this variable. That object is stored somewhere else in the memory, and the address of that memory location is stored inside that variable. So then when we copy x into y, it's the address or the reference that is copied. In other words, both x and y are pointing to the same object in memory. And when we modify that object using either x or y, the changes are immediately visible to the other variable. So here's the conclusion. Primitives are copied by value. Reference types or objects are copied by the reference. Let's take a look at another example. So I'm going to define a function called increase that takes a number, and here we simply increase this number by 1. Let's declare a number variable and set it to 10, and then call increase and pass this number. Now, if I log this number on the console, what do you think we're going to see? Let's have a look. So save the changes. We see 10. But didn't we increase the number? Well, when we call increase and pass this number variable, its value is copied into this parameter that is local in this function. So this number variable here is completely independent of this other number variable. Here in this function, we increment number by 1, so it will be 11. But after this function, this number is going to go out of the scope. So when we log this number on the console, we're essentially dealing with this first number. So I told you that primitives are copied by their value. So here we're dealing with two independent copies. That's why we see 10 on the console. Now let's change this to a reference type or an object. So I'm going to change 10 to an object that has a value property. Okay, let's rename this variable to object. And similarly, I'm going to rename this parameter in this function to object, and then increment object.value. Now, when we log this on the console, what do you think we're going to see? We're going to see 11. See? We got this object with value 11. The reason for this is because when we call increase and pass this object, this object is passed by its reference. So this local parameter that we have here will point to the same object that we defined here. So in this case, we are not dealing with two independent copies. We have two variables that are pointing to the same object. So any changes we make to this object will be visible to the other variable. So remember this. In JavaScript, we have value types, also called primitives, as well as reference types, which are objects. Our primitives are number, string, boolean, symbol, undefined, and null. Primitives or value types are copied by their value. Reference types or objects are copied by their reference. Hi guys, thank you for watching my JavaScript tutorial. This tutorial is part of my JavaScript course where you will learn all the essential JavaScript features that every web and mobile application developer must know. If you're an absolute beginner or have some experience in JavaScript and are looking for a fun and in-depth course that teaches you the fundamentals of JavaScript, this course is for you. This course is also packed with tons of exercises that help you master what you learned in the course. In fact, many of these exercises are questions that come up in technical programming interviews. So if you're pursuing a job as a front-end or a back-end developer, or if you simply want to have a more in-depth understanding of JavaScript, I highly encourage you to enroll in the course. For a limited time, you can get this course with a discount using the link in the video description.